Over the past few years, we've seen many directors take shots at the recent surge of comic book and superhero films. Joining the list of such directors this time is James Cameron. Not just that, but back in the 80s, the director almost worked on an R-rated Spider-Man film that would have changed everything for the MCU. Stay tuned as we talk about all of this and see how James Cameron almost changed Marvel forever. Starting with the creative marathon. The director of the Avatar franchise has recently called out big film corporations for being amateurs as they continue to claim that popcorn flicks are bringing cinema to an end. He said they've managed to turn artistic means of expression and endeavors into simple, cash-grabbing products with no soul. A lot of people back these takes, while others just end up taking an issue with these takes and adopt more of a live and let live mentality. Despite putting out significant films such as Terminator in the sci-fi field, James Cameron is another person against corporate greed. Now that he's put out the sequel in his franchise, Avatar: The Way of Water, though it still doesn't paint the complete picture of a perfect world, it proves a critical point. There must be a balance between the sprint for creativity and the overall marathon full of creativity. Next up, Avatar 2 builds the world pretty quickly. Admittedly, both Marvel and DC require a lot of content to build the worlds up, whether for film series such as The Avengers or the Justice League. It's one of the reasons they must put out so many trilogies, TV spin-offs, and post-credit secrets, and have to force in many cameos. Though some moments feel natural, such as when they were teasing Thanos, in most scenarios, the studios are trying to turn just a simple snowball into a full-on avalanche in the hopes that down the line, it's going to do them wonders at the box office. In just 2 movies for the Avatar series, Cameron was able to pull off the same kind of insane amounts of content to tie things in to make a cohesive universe. The first film showed us both Jake and Neytiri as they stopped the evil Colonel Quaritch from finding unobtainium. While the second film showed off the big bad coming back and trying to take out our main character, it changes things up by taking up from the jungles full of the Omitakayan clan over to seas full of the Metakayanin clan. And the most significant thing he accomplished was that the film wasn't just visually incredible. Still, it also showed Jake's family training and adapting to the new way they had to live and bond with another clan from the same species. What really helps the film is their length, making them feel more like a compressed series, which is a million times better than dragging the same thing out for years just to make a bearable narrative. Additionally, Avatar 2 never sacrifices character development. Unlike the typical setup for a superhero that DC and Marvel follow along with, Cameron ends up doing the opposite. Instead, he super quickly establishes the heroes and villains and even manages to foreshadow battles that will be fought against humanity in the future in a way that not even Black Panther could do. Though the natural assumption when the director makes the films go by so fast would be that there isn't a lot of development for the characters. That isn't true either. The film quickly sets up Jake's son as the next hero instead of waiting for a few movies, as we saw Sam Wilson do with Steve Rogers. We also get to see Raya of the Seas become the new Neytiri, along with the eldest son of Jake dying, which was shocking because no one expected that to happen too early on. But such instances aren't just there to add shock. The film uses all of these things to add as much possible to the plot. It motivates the characters to be better than their current selves and quickly manages to put an entirely new generation on an alien planet with many sub-realms and pockets. Not just that, but Quaritch's conflict is dealt with early on, right after he meets his son, teasing a redemption arc for the character rather than prolonging it. The director can pull that off because the series has no heroes or villains. Instead, everyone is an equally nuanced character, and the story can move toward any surface at any time. Finally, a superhero universe in his palms. In that same way, the director technically already has an entire universe of superheroes in his palm. One of the most brilliant things he's doing is spreading the narrative around. Because of that, he has a chance to speed the franchise up while still making sure it's able to maintain the depth it started with and that fans are consistently coming back to the screen to see what happens to their beloved characters in the future of Pandora. For example, if the director was working under a comic book studio, then he would have been forced to make much shorter movies. It would probably be an entire trilogy and a TV show on top of that to connect all the dots and fill fans in on the information that the film missed out on. But the director has proven that, much like The Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, filmmakers can take some risks in long-form theatrical storytelling instead of trying to milk their stories for all they can, as most superhero properties end up doing. 30 years ago, James Cameron wrote a wild Spider-Man movie and almost changed Marvel. First up, what was that big change? While the MCU is busy being absolutely in love with their multiverse, they get a real chance to explore the concept with Loki What If and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness in a bunch of different ways. But among all fans of the franchise, all of them agree that the most exciting moment in the MCU MCU featuring the multiverse was when Spider-Man, the Tom Holland version, was joined by previous versions of the character, both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, in the critically acclaimed Spider-Man No Way Home. But in another version of the same world we live in, there could be another version of the character as the first iteration of the character. Still, he would have been played by none other than Leonardo DiCaprio at this time. Let's go back to when James Cameron wrote and directed a Spider-Man film. The story of the director making a Spider-Man film goes back to the 80s, when Stan Lee was still looking into selling the rights to the character over to the renowned B-movie machine called Cannon Films. The project was then dragged on for a bunch more years, leading up to the 90s, when Coralco Pictures finally got hold of the rights to the characters and ended up hiring James Cameron, who was at the time working on True Lies, to write, direct, and produce the film. Moving on to a much darker hero. The director then put out a script for the film which was half of its writing and half of its treatment, about 50 pages long, to Coralco as he tried to describe what he wanted to do with the character. That very same script then recently leaked online, and concept art for the film was teased as part of the book Tech Noir, The Art of James Cameron. All three components, if put together, add up to a version of the character that's completely different from what we've seen on screen. The film would have included the character getting bitten by a radioactive spider, as usual, at the start, ending up in him getting some organic web shooting powers. However, nature would still make fake mechanical shooters so people wouldn't freak out and lose their minds. He would also have to come to terms with the fact that not only did he get the powers of a spider, their predatory instincts, and their thirst for blood. During a fight on top of the World Trade Center at the end of the Could Have Been film, the evil Electro, aka Carlton Strand, tells the hero that spiders are predators and their only reason to live is to kill. The creatures aren't affected by any ideals humans have, nor are they stopped in their lethal efficiency by the human delusion of morality. Next up is an R-rated Spider-Man. Though the film would have probably gotten a big R rating because of the super frequent profanity and graphic sex scenes that it featured between the hero and MJ right on top of the Brooklyn Bridge, along with the super long discussion about the mating rituals that spiders have, a highly unpleasant image to have, thanks to James Cameron. But in the end, the movie never came together, mainly because of the buttload of financial and legal problems that the team would have gotten into, keeping in mind the super complex history that the rights to Spider-Man have had. It could have changed the trajectory of the entire concept of a superhero movie as we know it, finally, completely changing the game. While some aspects of the script that the director wrote are super similar to what we saw in the first Spider-Man film that we saw by Sam Raimi, the treatment that he describes is much more similar to how the Dark Knight trilogy by Christopher Nolan was. Had the director been given a chance to make a Spider-Man film before the barrage of them started popping up in the 21st century, not only would it have been a step back from the more goofy versions of heroes seen in the 80s and 90s, but it would have made Nolan's films seem more like a continuation than a rebellion. What's even more interesting is the entirety of the MCU would have then had a completely different base to start from. Most of what turned into the default format for the franchise's films came from the movie that Raimi made, featuring a perfect combination of flashy action and humor. If the first take on the Marvel hero was more dark, profane, and gritty, then the MCU might have ended up looking much more like the Defenders universe out on Netflix instead of the squeaky clean Disney-fied version we see these days. While the vision that the director had for the hero was both brilliant and corny at the same time, we can't say how it could have changed the entire MCU as we know it, but that might not have happened either way. But it's certainly fun to think about a universe where that might be possible. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on the director? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this, and we'll see you in the next one.